Welcome back to The Leak. Well, the election is coming up soon, which means that Australians have the opportunity to decide who will be the next Prime Minister to be deposed by their own party. It's so exciting. What's going to happen next? Look, voting is a lot like going to Bunnings because you get a sausage sizzle at both, except if you make the wrong decision, Bunnings does have a returns policy at the very least. I'd like to return my Prime Minister. He's barely done anything. Now, this election will be a double dissolution, which sounds like the worst X-Men sequel ever. But unlike X-Men movies, double dissolution elections are actually quite rare. This type of election can only be called by the Prime Minister if the Senate rejects a bill twice. Now, when a double dissolution election is called, every MP in both the Senate and the House of Reps goes up for re-election. It's the political equivalent of turning the government on and off again. And if you're with the NBN, it might take a little bit of time to reconnect to the internet. The last time a double dissolution election was called was back in 1987 when Bob Hawke was returned as Prime Minister. Not only did Hawke dissolve the government, he would later go on to dissolve this beer in record time.
Robert! One for the country, Robert! One for the country!
Bob Hawke sculling a beer is the most exciting to happen at the cricket since Shane Warne tried to eat a beer. So what is the bill that has brought about this double dissolution? Well, it's a bill to fund the Australian Building and Construction Commission, or the ABCC. Who would have thought the ABC was just one typo away from having its funding increased? The ABCC used to be the watchdog of the construction industry, and its revival was condemned by Bill Shorten in a riveting speech.
Today, Mr Turnbull has decided to put his own future ahead of Australia's future. Today, Australians have seen a Prime Minister in full panic mode. There can be no better...
Do you know what's more interesting than Bill Shorten? That blank wall. So to sum it up, the ABCC is bringing about a double D election because it's a bill opposed by many Australians, including the Leader of the Opposition, who also happens to be a bill that many Australians oppose. Australian politics, it's as easy as ABC. C. This election, there are going to be some important changes to the ballot. For the first time, the ballot will include party logos. The logo for Nick Xenophon's party has some interesting inspiration.
About Nick Xenophon Giant X makes a big statement of X for Xenophon, but it's also exactly the same image that was used on the Ed Sheeran album X.
Nick Xenophon must be a big fan of Ed Sheeran, though it could have been worse. Imagine if he were a fan of Nirvana. Ooh. Anyway, never mind. In addition to these logos, voting for the Senate has changed to do with the complex preference swapping system.
The current system means voters can just put a 1 next to the party above the line, and the party decides which other candidates will be preferenced throughout the count. The proposed changes means that parties won't be able to specify preferences, and so control of preferences is handed back to voters.
See, previously, if you wanted to control the preferences in your vote, you had to vote below the line, which was pretty time-consuming. At the 2013 federal election, people in New South Wales had to number 110 boxes to control their preferences. Some of those people are still voting. The only time anyone should be marking 110 boxes is if you're Shane Warne at an STI clinic. It's the only time. Malcolm Turnbull did explain, though, why the reforms were necessary.
Australians were astonished to see people elected to the Senate whose primary votes were a fraction. In the case of one senator from Victoria, about 0.5% of the vote.
Exactly. You should only hold an office if the people voted you into it, said Malcolm Turnbull. But Malcolm does have a point. These changes will prevent senators from being elected with only tiny fractions of the vote. The senator Malcolm was referring to was Ricky Muir from the Australian Motoring Enthusiast Party, who'll be represented like this on the ballot paper. But maybe he'll be better represented by this graph. Because at the last election, Ricky became a senator with only 0.51% of the primary vote. That's barely above Bob Hawke's blood alcohol concentration and well below Shane Warne's. I mean, you shouldn't become a senator based solely on the votes of your blood relatives. Now, look, yes, Ricky has grown into the role, but at the time, he was not ready to become a senator. Soon after he was voted in, home footage surfaced of him teaching his daughter how to do burnouts in a V8 with the heading 8-year-old girl smoking tyres. The number 8 should never apply to both the engine and the age of the driver. Actually, though, maybe this should have been his logo. Yeah, that would have been much better. John Madigan, who was elected with only 2.33% of the vote, is very upset about the changes.
John Madigan says voters are smart and that 1 in 3 deliberately chose not to cast their votes for the major parties in 2013.
So if you're doing such a hot job, fellas, why are people voting for people other than you, and why is their voice not entitled to be heard and given representation in this place?
I want to hear more of John's husky Batman voice. I'm not the senator you voted for, I'm the senator you deserve. Family First Senator Bob Day challenged the changes in the Senate voting at the High Court, where he told ABC News, "I feel like Daryl Kerrigan from the castle." Sadly for Bob, the High Court dismissed his application unanimously and in their judgment told him that he was dreaming. But Bob didn't walk away empty-handed. He got his application framed and it's going straight to the pool room. So what's going to happen to these senators when they inevitably lose their seats? Well, Ricky Muir doesn't seem too fazed.
Very surprised if they didn't.
And this rule goes through, you're gone.
Yeah, look, there is a very real chance that I'll be gone. I've always stated that if anything like that was to ever happen, I'll be happy to go back to Timber Mill. So me personally will be able to go back and spend a lot more time with my family.
Honey, get the engine warm. Daddy's coming home.